to kick us off, I'm going to ask our first panel to come up, and I'm very excited. I'm so excited about these three ladies. They're three funny, smart ladies, and they are using comedy to change the perception. With Leighann. Leighann Lord is a stand-up comedian. She has appeared on Comedy Central, HBO, The View, and Showtime's Even More Funny Women of a Certain Age. She's performed for our troops. Her dry bar comedy special has had over 1 million views. She was a TV co-host on Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson. She is the author of several very, very funny humor books. And I met Leighann. We were talking today. We first met many years ago. We did a Three Tomatoes event at, I think it was the Broadway Comedy Theater. And we asked for 3 female comedians for that event, and Leighann was one of them. And as soon as I saw her, I said, this lady is going places. And well, has she. And we're so happy. I'm so happy to have you back here. And we've stayed connected all those years, too. Then I'm so excited to introduce you to Carole Montgomery, who I'm actually very happy she's here, because this is very early for a stand-up comic, because they're used to being in clubs at night, right? So Carole is a respected veteran of the stand-up comedy scene nationwide. She has over 24 TV credits to her name. She's headlined clubs, colleges across the USA, starred in 2 different Las Vegas shows, and she is the creator of 3 Funny Women of a Certain Age specials for the Showtime Network. And then we have Tulis McCall. Tulis was actually the keynote speaker at our very first Renewal Summit 7 years ago. So welcome back. It took us a while to get you back, but we're happy that you're back here with us. Tulis is an award-winning wit, wag, and an observer of life's mysterious ways. She sets her sights on the greatest mystery of all, the conveyor belt of life, and our place in the lineup. When she suddenly sees a woman of a certain age staring back from her mirror, she demands to know how and when did that broad get there. Her award-winning one-woman shows, let me switch my page here. They include Are You Serious? A Woman of a Certain Age Inquires, and All in the Timing. And when she's not performing, she's also a wedding officiant. Good thing to know if you know anyone getting married. Exactly. And she also has a sign up for her newsletter, because she does, it's called Monday Morning Musings, and every Monday you can listen to whatever her latest musing is about. So sit down, ladies, and we're now going to show a little video clip just so you get a sense of what these ladies are like on the stage.
Good morning, and now for something a little different. Here's a recording of a guy named Don Lemon a few days ago on CNN, and I'll be back when he's done.
This whole talk about age makes me uncomfortable. I think it's the wrong road to go down. Sorry, when a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What are you talking? Wait.
That's not according to me.
Prime for what?
It depends. I mean, it's just like prime. If you look it up, if you Google when is a woman in her prime, it'll say 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Okay, so this guy, this Mr. Lemon, I call him one of the smooth people. Because the smooth people are the people who look at me and call me dear, when I am not their dear and they are not my dear. They are the ones who think that people like me are past my prime. And a lot of times, these people, these smooth people, are men. Because for men, prime is not an adjective, it's a location. And they are always in it, young, old, or dead.
I'm not doing the birthdays anymore. When you consider a 50-year-old a younger man, what's to celebrate?
The difference between like young people sex and old people sex is that young people can go for hours, not old people. You do 10 minutes, you could die.
Every guy in Brooklyn looks like a Viking on a bicycle. When did looking like a biblical figure become a hot look?
It's very nice to be on Women of a Certain Age, because what would the all-male special be called? Congress?
I'm transgender. I was married when I came out. I said, honey, we have to talk. She looked at me, she goes, is it another woman?
Listen, my sweet young millennials, you have something that our generation will never have again. Hope.
Aging while female is not for the faint of heart.
Now, whenever a man asks me how old I am, I ask him if he's good in bed. Yeah, see, that way we both know we're about to lie.
Amen. Can I get a witness?
I turned 56 in February. Since then, I forget everything, like that I'm 60.
Well, that gives you a sense of what these very talented women do on stage and how they are really using comedy to change how we think of older women. So, Carole, I'm going to start with you, and we'll get into funny women of a certain age in a minute. But I want to know, how did you get into comedy, and particularly stand-up? And I also know that you talk about your early years traveling comedy clubs with your like 3-month-old babies. So.
Yes, who's now 31.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
Okay, well, my dad was a very funny man, and he was a high school teacher and a bookie, and so that was great to learn about math. But he was always a very larger-than-life man, and he was a bartender in the Catskill Mountains back in the day when yes, okay. So I didn't realize this until I was already doing stand-up, but I realized that I used to go sit with him when I was like 6 and 7 years old, and sit with him while he was setting up the bar, and the comedians for the week would come in, like Toady Fields, or Jackie Mason, or Jack Roy, who ends up being Rodney Dangerfield. So I said to my father years later, I said, it's your fault I became a comedian, because I was around it. When you're a young child, you absorb that type of stuff. And so that's how I started doing comedy. I actually saw Freddie Prinze, Sr., not Jr., on The Tonight Show, and that was a big moment for me, because I was like, wow, this guy, what's this? Because stand-up comedy wasn't the way it is now. Now everyone's a stand-up comedian. Do you know what I mean? So it was very unusual to see this young man doing comedy, and he was so funny, and that really got me on that path to becoming a comic. And then, of course, George Carlin and Richard Pryor, they were my idols, and I started to watch them, and I started to absorb it. And that's how I became a comedian. Now, as far as traveling with the child, I was one of the, there's a lot of women that have children, which is great. But when I started, there was maybe 5 of us that had children on the road. And I, of course, grew up in the 70s, whereas I Am Women heard me roar. So I just would bring him I would literally bring him with me. I started traveling with him when he was 6 months old. And I would go to, and the clubs I was working, some were clubs, some were bars, some were very shady. And one time I'm literally walking with my son, he's 6 months old, and the bouncer says to me, you can't bring the baby in here, he's a minor. And I said, what do you think, he's going to go to the bar and ask for a tit on the rocks? I mean, what's wrong with you? Yes, and so and ironically, when we talk about children absorbing, my son is 31 now, and he works in nightclubs. He runs nightclubs, so of course he was going to end up somewhere in the business.
All in the family.
All in the family.
So, Carole, now I want to talk to you about funny women of a certain age. I remember, 5-6 years ago, seeing this show playing around New York. I didn't get a chance to see it, but I thought, what a great idea this is. And now it's exploded. You've had 3 Showtime specials. So tell us how you came up with doing this, and then how you got it to Showtime, and the incredible success of it.
Oh, thank you. When I turned 50, I realized that the industry was not kind to women my age. They're not kind to women in any industry at that point, but I was like, okay, I'm going to have to start pivoting. So I started directing solo shows, I started producing, I started doing more writing, I started to teach, and when I was 59 years old, I was on a podcast with a bunch of other female comics, and we had such a great time, and they were all around our age. And I remember going home and calling my husband, because it was all the way out like on Long Island. I called him up on the phone. I said, honey, you know what? I think I should do a show with women who are over 50, because there's so many of us. And it's the only time in my husband's, in our marriage that he's gone, that's a good idea. Because in my business, I'm sure in whatever business you're in, you throw enough shit on the wall, something's going to land. And this was the final thing that did it. So we premiered at a place called it was a festival called the Cinder Block Festival in New York City. Judy Gold was on that show. Janine Garofalo was on that show. And when we were, after the show was over, somebody who was working for the festival came up to me and said, Carole, I think I work at a theater called The Crane, which is on the Lower East Side. I think my boss would love to see this. And so that turned into a 6-year residency. We were in our 6th year at The Crane down on the Lower East Side. And I had a producing partner, and I said to him, he knew about the show, and I just wanted it to be a live show. I just wanted to give women work, And he said, we should take this to networks. And I was like, okay. So we went through our Rolodexes, and we had, each of us had our...
What's a Rolodex?
What's a Rolodex?
I'm sorry. I just want everyone in the room to understand your term.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
You know you're over 50 if you know what a Rolodex is.
Leighann is my translator. And we literally had meetings. The first meeting we ever had was with Showtime. And I love telling this story because this is so typical of men in general. And my partner is a man, but very pro-women. But we're sitting at the meeting, and the network exec's here, and we're together, and he starts going. He's pitching it like it's the last thing he's ever going to do. And he finishes up. And the network exec looks at him and goes, I'd like to hear from Carole now. And they were very interested from the beginning, but what I think turned it over was we decided to do a major showcase in February of the, we premiered in September. We decided to do a showcase in February of that year. Leighann was on that show. And we had all these network people. Yeah, and I didn't tell her, none of the comedians knew that there was industry there because that messes up a comedian's mind, So I didn't tell them till way afterwards. And then from that is when we got the deal with Showtime. What was fascinating is the Showtime executive, he was a young man, like in his 30s, but he got it. I said, you're missing a huge demographic, which I still say, and why I love the Three Tomatoes, is that everyone gears all the advertising, all that stuff is geared for 17 to 34, and it's like, we're the ones that have the money. My son keeps asking me for money. So he got it right away, and so we literally premiered in September. We had the deal with Showtime by April. I actually had it was when I turned 60. It was my 60th birthday present. I couldn't tell anybody, though. And then we shot it, and then it premiered the following year. So that never happens in show business. I mean, we came up with an idea, and we had the deal in April, and it was on the air 6 months later. So that's how it all happened.
And weren't you the highest rated special, too?
Well, you could say it. I feel like I'm boasting.
It was was it the first one?
The first special
was the highest rated special on Showtime that season. So let's hear it for that.
Yeah.
And how you showcase women, which is awesome.
Well,
Thank you.
I mean, one of the reasons I was so excited about being on this panel and being in the summit is, the television wants you to think that we're all like backbiting bitches. Do you know what I mean? Which I have a little bit in me. I'm not going to lie. Okay, but thank you. But that's not what women are about. Women really want to uplift each other. I really do believe that. I mean, do we all have that one catty woman that you want to just kill? Thank you, Tulis. Right. But it's so important because the men are not going to do it. You know what? The men are not going to do it. There's so many men have said to me, "Why won't you do men of a certain age?" And I go, "Because Jim Gaffigan doesn't need my fucking help."
Well, thank you. So,
no problem.
Tulis and Leighann has something in common, aside from being very smart, funny people, but you've both been in Funny Women of a Certain Age shows. So what was that experience? Let's start with you, Tulis. What is that experience like to be there doing that?
I think... Thanks, Mom. I'm 73.
Yeah!
Years old. Or I should say, my age is 73. I have no idea what I am. But I noticed a real difference because I'm more of a storyteller. I don't even like that word. But the stand-up world, you know, you get to the punchline. You're like Gatling guns, you know. I mean, it takes me 5 minutes to get to the punchline of, I don't like blowjobs. Now, these ladies are going to get there a lot faster. That's all I have to say about that. But it's a different, you know, each morsel is like a golden nugget, which is why I admire your work so much, because my brain just has to go out around the thing and come back down the aisle and then, you know, give you the reward, if you've been paying attention, of, you know, the line. But I think that there's a huge difference there, although we achieved the same, you know, thing, hopefully.
Tulis did a great job.
I want to ask Leighann now, what is that experience to be on the stage with all of these female comedians over a certain age? How has that been for you?
Well, it was, first of all, it was wonderful, but I really thought it was women over 40. So, like, what? It's over 50? What?
She's 97.
I am. Good skincare and jeans. But no, it was an absolutely fantastic experience, you know, to get to work with Carole. Carole is like one of my best friends in comedy. And to be finally invited to do the special, because I did the third special. And what made it even more amazing was who I got to work with, Marsha Warfield. Marsha Warfield was in Night Court. She was the bailiff, in Night Court. She was Roz in Night Court. And I remember seeing her. I was that kid that would stay up late after my parents had gotten to bed and watch comedy. You know, I'd flip channels. It's not that. For me, it was still that. So I'm flipping channels, and if there was somebody standing there with a microphone, boom, that was it. That's what I'm watching. And I remember the first time that I saw Marsha Warfield do comedy. I saw a black woman do comedy, and it was like my head did that RCA Victor turn, like, huh? Like, we do that? And I was absolutely riveted and inspired. And then so, you know, many, many years later, to be on a show with her. And we had connected over social media, which is why social media is so great. I had told her, I'm a big fan of yours. And she goes, well, I like your work too. And I was like, what? Oh my, it was to hear that from someone that you idolize. And so when we got to do the show together, I messaged her. I said, listen, this is going to be uncomfortable for you. So if you want to get the restraining order ahead of time, I understand. But she was incredibly, you know, fun and supportive, and it just made doing the show even more of a highlight for me.
Well, Carole, you've definitely created something very special with this, not only with
Thank you.
for all of us, but
Thank
for
you.
all of the women who've been participating. So now I want to move over to Tulis. So you are an actor, a writer, a producer. You have created, I would call it monologues. I don't know if you call them their stories, but wonderful one-women shows. And I think you talked a little bit earlier about how monologue, what you do is different from stand-up. It's really a different kind of art form, isn't it? Want to just talk about that a little bit?
I remember seeing James Whitmore do Will Rogers. Oh, wow. And that was a shocking, wonderful thing. And then I was so taken by that. One person just does that? And then I saw Vivica Lindfors do a play called I Am Woman, and I thought it was so bad. I thought, well, I can do that. I could be that bad. That would work. But there's something about the ability to grab everybody and say, come with me, just follow along, and have it be filled with twists and turns. And you know, sometimes there's going to be tears, and other times there's going to be screaming laughter, and it's a roller coaster, you know, like a very gentle wave. And I came from storytellers. You know, my aunts and uncles, we would always fight to see who's going to sit next to Uncle Billy at dinner, because you wouldn't eat, you just, you know, talk. So yeah, and I also grew up with listening to moderators, you know, good moderators on TV, like Eric Sevareid and Walter Cronkite. I mean, they were all men at the time, but that's kind of where the Monday Musings has come from, because I remember being a kid and watching Eric Severide and thinking, I understand what he's, I'm 10, but I get what he's saying. He's talking to me. So I just have been attracted to that solo.
Well, and
that ability.
you do it so wonderfully. If you ever get a chance to see Tulis perform any of her one-woman shows, I mean, the one, Are You Serious? A Woman of a Certain Age in Choirs is priceless. All in the timing. I went with a group, I think you were at Pangeo and you did that. I mean, I have never laughed so hard in my whole life. And it's not just the humor, it's your observations. I mean, you're a real observer of life. So did that come from growing up in this family of storytellers, or were you one of those kids who always said, well, why, and what? I have a feeling you were one of those kids, right?
Pretty much. Yep. And it was, I would see things and I just didn't feel like anybody else was seeing what was going on. So what I'm finding is that if I just, and this has got to be the same with the two of you, it drops in. It just drops in. And if you follow that sinker, it's going to take you to someplace that surprises you. And the more specific you are, the more universal it is. So, like your wonderful line about we're both going to lie. It's like everybody goes, oh, yes, I know that.
True story.
So, yeah, just, they all are, But it's just following that. I don't know what the Monday Musing is going to be.
In your shows, you touch on a lot of different themes, though. So just mention, I mean, there's aging, but it's just life in general. How would you describe some of the themes that you're
Well, it's
an observer
noticing
of?
all of a sudden, I mean, we all noticed when our parents got older, right? It was like, whoa, they got older. But then you look in the mirror. I remember looking at photos of my parents at their wedding and going, dang, they were young. And then I looked in the mirror and I went, so was I. So that's a surprise, and, all of a sudden my friends have moved to Florida. Oh. What? Right? Oh. I know. Relatives have moved to Florida. But I went to a reunion and all those kids, they're still 18 to me. Yeah. But they're 70s, but it's still...
We need to find a new state to go to retire to. We need to find a new state to retire to.
Let's do Montana.
Oh, yes, that's a good one. No.
Big sky.
I was thinking Canada.
Canada's a good state. Canada's a state.
Anyway, did that answer? I mean,
yes. And so, Tulis, I have another little question for you here, because I know you have peeves. That deer one really hit me. I hate it when you're being called dear by some 23-year-old. So, do you have some other pet peeves that we might?
Guys, don't look at a bunch of women and call us guys. It's and I say if I go to a bar, I talk to the bartender. He comes, ma'am, because I'm a ma'am now. Okay, you sit down with me. He's going to walk back and so guys. It's like they can't do two ma'ams. They cannot do it.
They can't do
so
two
I
ma'ams.
think that's
a T-shirt. They can't do two ma'ams.
That's an erasure.
And yet that's their fantasy.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Anyway, so guys, dear, I stop people. Did you just dear me?
Good.
And some people go, I do it to everybody. All right, I'm telling you, I do it. And one guy just went, I don't know what to do. He said, with guys, I call them sir. I call all the men sir. He said, with women, it's miss, it's ma'am, and people get pissed off if I call them ma'am. I can't call them lady. You're very complicated. So anyway, pisses me off. Don't call women guys. Don't make me come out there.
Well, I'm going to move over to Leighann now. And Leighann, I know that, I know how close you were to your parents. And I know they came here from the West Indies. You grew up in Jamaica, Queens. They were hardworking people. They wanted you to have a great education as their only daughter, which you did. By the way, she graduated magna cum laude from Baruch. This is one smart, funny lady, let me tell you that.
And I actually went to Baruch, unlike George Santos. I never claimed to.
And so I know after college you did go into the corporate world for a little bit till you decided you wanted to be a stand-up comic. And I want to know what that conversation must have been like with your parents when you told them that.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I did do a stint in corporate America. I was there for 5 years, long enough to get vested, complete accident. I really wanted to do theater, but I just didn't feel like I could take my parents' investment in my education and go, hey, I just want to go play now. So I figured I had to get a real job, and I knew 2 days into this job that I hated it. It just wasn't what I wanted to do, so I spent that time searching, and I found stand-up, or it found me, from my theater background. And I wasn't looking for permission, but my parents and I were very close. And, I went from loving them as a child to liking them as an adult. We had a good relationship. I'm like, how do I tell them that this is what I want to do? So I went back to my Catholic school upbringing, and, you divide and conquer when you want something. So I separated them, and I told them at a different time. And I told my dad first, because, daddy's girl. Daddy's girl could do no wrong. So I don't even remember where we were. And I said to my dad, Daddy, I've really thought about this. I really don't like what I'm doing now, and I want to be a stand-up comedian. And he turned to me and he smiled and he said, what took you so long? And from that moment, he was my biggest fan. People thought he was my manager. People would, come to my shows and walk up to me and go, you don't know me, but we met your dad.
Mr. Lord used to show up at all. When he showed up, we were all so happy.
Yeah.
When he showed up, he was the greatest guy.
He would go to comedy clubs, and he wasn't just there for me. My dad, he's such a rare breed. He thought the more love you gave away, the more you got. So he watched everybody on the shows. Yep. They would come up to him and talk to him, and what did you think of this joke? Or I'm sorry, I cursed. And my dad's like, son, I'm from Bed-Stuy. You're gonna have to curse better than that if you want to offend me. So it's like I got all these comedy brothers and sisters, with me. And my mom, I did tell my mom, because how could I not? And she said, you have done everything we've asked you to do. You've been a good student. You went and got a good job. She said, this is your time in life. Better you try now and figure out that you do or do not want to do it than you live with regret. So I had two of the biggest loving champions in my career.
That's so beautiful, Leighann. So, we're talking about comedy in terms of changing perceptions of age, and it definitely, we see comedy being used very often to change social norms and how we think about things. And you started a podcast a while back. I know you became a caretaker for both your parents, called People with Parents, and you were using humor to shed light on what is a really very difficult job of caretakers and the role reversals with our parents. So tell us a little bit about that podcast and how that was been received.
Oh, sure. The podcast started, it was really out of, I guess, desperation. I didn't know caretaking was a thing. I was just living my life, and my parents were my parents, and they were fine until one day they kind of weren't. And I was the only one there, and I kind of came off the road a little bit, and the more I paid attention to what they were going through, the more I saw, because they couldn't hide it. And as I guess what all artists do, we put our lives into our art. And I started with jokes on stage that I didn't think people were going to get, about how I'm a new mom, I have a 77 and an 84-year-old, things like that. And I got people coming up to me, talking to me after the show, telling me about their mom, their mother-in-law, their husband, their grandmother. Like, I had no idea there was this whole world. And so I started the podcast because I felt very alone in this. The very first episode, my episode 0, was like, listen, I don't know who's going to listen to this, but if anybody has any help, let me know. And it was me just telling stories. It's another avenue for telling these stories that happened between me and my aging parents, the role reversal. And one of my most popular episodes, because I had Carole on the show, but it was really just me talking. It was the air conditioner problem in our house. Like at what point in a multi-generational home, what do you set the temperature at? Yes. And I remember waking up, it was July, it was the middle of the night, and I woke up sweating, and I'm like, what is happening? Is this menopause? Is this how it starts? I had no idea. Turns out my dad was turning the heat on because he was cold. And the thermostat control was in his part of the house, because we have a 2-family house, and the battle raged. And I talked about this for 3 episodes, so much so I would show up to gigs and babies were like, hey, Leighann, how you doing? So what's going on with the thermostat?
Tell them the name of your home.
Oh, I call it the Urban Shady Pines. You know, because I wasn't, my idea is that, you know, they didn't know it, but that was their retirement home. That's where they were going to be, and that's where I wanted to keep them at home as long as I could do that safely. And that sounds really lofty until you wake up in the middle of the night and the heat is on. So I would call it the Urban Shady Pines, and, you know, that's...
But what actually happened? Tell them the end. Did you ever have the air conditioner on in the summer?
Oh, Lord. Okay, listen. I had them come in, replace the thermostat with one that I could control on my phone. And I locked the old man out of it. But then it also, you can't, the balance between managing what that must feel like, that vulnerability. Because I remember when I was little, I was 12, I was really moody, and my dad sat down and talked to me, and he said, baby, I don't know what to do for you. I've never had a 12-year-old daughter before. And, you know, of course I thought, so wait, you don't know what you're doing? Many years later, I'm sitting down with my dad, having a very similar conversation and saying, I've never had an 80-year-old before. You have to help me. And he's feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling scared, and so, yeah, it's funny that I replaced the thermostat, but I had to explain, I want you to be comfortable, but you're not the only one living in the house. How do we do this? In that conversation, because that respect has to be there. The same way they tried to do it for me, and I survived my teenage years, that's the least I could do for them. So.
That's beautiful. Beautifully, beautifully said. So another thing I wanted to ask the 3 of you is to just weigh in we have a few minutes left. What do you think is the state of comedy today? I know that a lot of male comics have said they find doing stand-up very difficult because of all the sensitivities and things they feel they can no longer say that they would. How do you, in general, let's start with Tulis.
Well, I haven't been doing that much. Like I need a microphone, right?
I did a cabaret show last year, and then my vocal coach was murdered, so that kind of took the stuffing out of my sack there. So I haven't done anything in a while, but now I'm leaving my day job, and I'm looking forward to it. But so I don't have that because of the formality, let's say, of what I do, and even if it's a cabaret, you know, people are on their good behavior, pretty much. So I think, you know, I think over to you 2 ladies. So what are your thoughts?
Well, okay. You know, that's a wonderful question, because if you're good and you're funny, I think you can get away with a lot. But what's happened is comedy has exploded. Like when I started in the late 70s, there were not a lot of comics. There were hardly any female comics. But there's so many people now that think that they're comedians. And there are some great young comics. I'm not saying that there isn't, because there has to be younger people to replace when we move up and everything. But what now is you have a generation of comics who say, well, I can say whatever I want, and that's unheard. You know, it has to be funny. It has to come down to being funny. You can't punch down. You can't. So we're getting to this point, and I've had this discussion with many comics. Some comics feel the need to like, oh, well, I don't want to disturb it. I don't want to upset anybody. And I'm like, that's not what we are. We're the court jesters. We're the ones making fun of the king. Okay, so I still tell the dick jokes I told 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Dick ain't changed.
And Dick ain't changed. That's another T-shirt. Dick ain't changed.
I'm sorry.
But you have to understand, we're not going to please everybody. We're not going to please everybody. But at least with women, we're more interesting than the men are. And I'm not trying to bash the men because there's some great young male comics out there. But for the most part, there's a lot of young men. Like there was a whole big thing, I would say a couple of years ago, where everyone was doing rape jokes. Now, that's a horrible subject to talk about. None of the jokes were funny. Do you understand what I mean? Like, there was nothing funny about it. So I remember having this and they're like, well, I can say what I want. You know, I'm like, no, it has to be funny. Lenny Bruce, who went to jail and became a heroin addict because of the way the media treated him, his stuff was funny because he was trying to pull back the curtain to make people see. Talking about rape because you think that's the thing, that's not edgy, it's not funny. Stop doing it. And one of the things I used to say to my son when he was growing up is, you know, he's been around his mother's life, I said, you can say whatever you want, but it has to be funny. And I will stand by that. You can't do anything racist. You can't do anything homophobic. I had a little boy one time I was driving him to Little League, and he started a setup to a joke I knew was racist. And I stopped the car. We were driving to a game. I said, get out of the car. And he said, what? I said, get out of the car. He goes, but we're in the middle of nowhere. I said, what was the rule? It has to be funny? I said, that's not funny. Get out of the car. And I literally, did it for a point. He got out of the car. I slowly started to move the car. He just looked at me. He was so shocked that I did that. And then I stopped and I moved back in. I said, get in the car. I said, what's the lesson? He goes, I won't ever tell racist or homophobic jokes ever again, Carole. Now get out of the car. Like, I never look at a crowd. Like, I know there are people that do this, and they look at the crowd like whether or not it's older. Like, Leighann and I we were in Florida last year, and we're so used to playing to women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, we never realized that there were women, like, older. Like, we had women in their 90s at this show. There was a woman who was 100, and it was a little awkward. We were like, how do we do this? Like, I remember saying, how many women are in their 60s? And I started to go lower, and somebody in the audience goes, go higher. You know, so I mean, I just go out and I do what I do. Either you like me or you don't like me. I think Leighann feels the same way. We know our stuff is good, and all we're trying to do is make you laugh. We're just trying to make you laugh. So if you go, well, I don't like that joke. Tough shit.
Another one.
There'll be another one, right? Or tough shit is what I say. Go ahead, Leighann, your turn.
A comic, a professional comedian, and this is a job. You know, when someone is paying you to come up here and be funny, most people are funny. All of you are funny. Unless you are a psychopath, you are funny. The difference is when you are now called to do it on stage for a fee in front of strangers. Now the clock is ticking. So a professional comic has to be able to walk in, look at an audience, and have some flexibility and go, these jokes about whatever are not going to work. When I perform at colleges, and it's been a minute because I'm their auntie now, I won't open with material about taking care of parents or divorce. It's not the right time. It's not the right fit for them. So I have to be flexible. Intention. When you stand on stage, and the audience as well, what does it seem like that intention is coming from the comic? Did I intend to hurt your feelings with that joke? You should be able to go, yeah, no, Leighann didn't mean to hurt me. And I should be able to project that's not where that joke came from, you know, and looking at who I am as a person and as my act holistically. And time and place, sometimes is not the right time to tell a certain joke. You know, I do a lot of corporate work. That's a very different venue than performing at a nightclub, time and place. You know, so all of these things have to be taken into account. So when you see a comic doing it on stage and it's looking effortless, it is not. but it is absolutely intentional, and it's meant to entertain, and it's meant to be funny. It always has to be funny. Otherwise, it's a TED Talk like what I just did.
Well,
Which
thank
was
you,
funny.
Leighann, for that TED Talk. We really appreciate it. So I also just want to ask briefly, we have a few more minutes. I know that Carole and Leighann, you have both performed for our troops extensively. Just briefly, what is that experience like for you?
I started doing it before Carole. I went over to Afghanistan in 2002. And I remember when I got the phone call, and I thought it came down to me because a lot of comics were saying no, they were too afraid to go. And I was a newlywed, and I'm like, well, if I could be married, I could do this. And what I found really interesting was seeing what 18 years old looks like in a uniform with a gun. And it's like that can't hide the baby face, and I'd meet these kids, and I'm like, does your mom know you're here? You just wanted to take them back home. But for all the folks that were nervous, because my mom did not want me to go. My dad was like, you can't stand her in her way. She's going to go anyway. That opportunity to perform in front of what I think is some of the most grateful audiences in the world, because they are doing an incredibly stressful job. And the pressure to be funny when most of your audience is armed is, really up there.
Well, first of all, what she didn't tell you is she was, they were babies. But when we toured, the first tour, she was a runner back then. And so she wrote. Right. So she gets up. Now, when she said to some of the soldiers, she said, can I run with you guys? I need to. And they're like, sure. What time? 4 a.m. They're in full uniform with their guns running, and there's Leighann like in this beautiful, jogging outfit. And she's like, hey, So
you had to run at dawn because it was like 130 degrees after sunrise. You had to get it in. Yeah.
Well, my dad was a Korean War veteran, so I always wanted to go. To honor my father's service, and that was one of the nicest things he ever said to me. Because when we did South Korea, they gave me this. They knew my dad was a veteran, and they gave me this great plaque to give to him. And we were talking about it, and he was like, he remembered when Bob Hope came to see them. So it was it was a very emotional moment for him, because I know that I finally reached him with something with my stand-up career. Because my father didn't come see me the first 2 years I was doing stand-up, and years later my mother said he was afraid you were going to bomb. So, thanks, Dad. But the experience is whether or not you're pro-war, anti-war, these young men and women are out there doing the work. They're protecting us. They're protecting us from whatever the outside sources are. And the other thing that's really important about the military stuff, because we never did anything political. We just were there to make them laugh. But some people were like, well, they're being forced to be there. I said, there was never anybody that ever came up to me and said, can you get me out of here, please? Do you know what I mean? They all wanted to be there. And they are, like Leighann said, the greatest audience in the world, and sometimes it wasn't even doing the show. It was hanging out with them afterwards.
Well, I think it's a great thing that you both have spent so much time doing that. And before we close, we got to wrap up. And I promised I want you to each do a shameless plug. What are you doing next, and where can we see you, fabulous ladies?
Every Monday I do. Jesus. Yenta. That's what you are. You're a Yenta.
I am a Yenta.
You are. Every Monday I do something called Monday Musings. And you can go to my website, which is tulismccall.com, and click on the thing that says Musings, and you can subscribe to it. It's 5 minutes long, Eric Severide length. Yep. And I always think, oh, God, if I could get this done earlier in the week. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do until Sunday. I sit down at the computer and go, okay, something better start happening here. And it's just, I did a thing on artichokes and world peace. And I did the thing on the Prime and an essay on turkeys, and so it sort of runs the gamut. But I would love to have you listen, and then you could be on my mailing list. So when I do perform, I can let you know. So that's it. Over to
Awesome.
you, Carole.
Thanks, Eric.
Use the microphone.
Obviously, if you have Showtime, please watch the specials. You know, I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of what I've done for the women on that show. You know, it's so funny. Fran Drescher, who was a lovely, lovely woman, but she had a resurgence after she did the special, and I kind of feel really good about that. And also, I think Hacks would never have happened without my special, so you're welcome. And so please watch them. We're trying to figure out where exactly the best audience for us is for social media. I'm not sure if it's Instagram. I'm not sure if it's Facebook. But there's a Funny Women of a Certain Age Instagram, also a Funny Women of a Certain Age Facebook. Also, you can find me there. If you're in town for June, we're doing, at the Crane, we're doing Funny Women of a Certain Age for Pride Week. For the Pride Month. It's for the part of the Queerly Festival. So if you go on frigid.nyc, you can find out when the date is. I think it's the 21st. But please come see us live. Hopefully, we will be turning the specials into a weekly series. We just don't know where we're going to land yet.
Okay, Leighann, what are you up to next?
I can't believe you neglected to mention our show on Sunday.
Oh, gosh.
Where are we?
We're in Long Island.
Thank you.
Riverhead, Long Island, at the Suffolk. So
the Suffolk Theater. But I tell folks, I don't hide. I'm easy to find. I'm eminently Googleable. But my website is veryfunnylady.com because I have no illusions that after a couple of drinks you can spell my name. That's a little challenging. And that's, I call that the gateway to me. I am on Instagram. I'm still on Twitter because I love a good dumpster fire. But please follow me, and I do promote and list my shows. And I love to see women of a certain age in my audience.
I want to thank these three amazing women. They're funny, they're smart, they're compassionate, they're caring, they're everything that grown-up women should be. So thank you for being
thank you for having us. Thank you so much.